Crash and burn.
Hey everybody. So tonight I'm going to be discussing Faces of Death 4. I don't even remember when this was released. And the only reason I'm doing 4 is because it was my favorite when I was a kid. And so I figured that would be the best one to kind of throw up on YouTube because I don't want to do all of these. Essentially, if you've seen one, you've seen them all. The fourth one was my favorite. It's got the satanic cult in it, which is clearly fake. And it's got the FBI guys suffocating the gangster or whatever, which was clearly fake. It's got the guy whose leg's been severed by the part of the car when he's working in the junkyard, which again is clearly fake. It's got the reenactment of the guy who's electroshocking the nurse, which is clearly fake, and he sticks the screwdriver in her neck. But sort of tossed in, sprinkled in throughout all of these rather pathetic reenactments are actual footage of people who have died in various ways. Like at the start, it opens up with shots of a morgue, of course, and the morgue worker moving the body from A to B. And then it shows like somebody who got pinned between a subway, and the subway and the platform were being used as sort of a makeshift tourniquet to keep the person's guts inside because the hit itself didn't kill them. It shows somebody who was pulled out of the water in New York somewhere where they call them a floater, of course, because they're totally frozen. And that type of shit used to enthrall me when I was like a little kid, because I think it's a Gen X thing, because I think when I talk to people who are older than me, people who are in their 50s and their 60s about these movies, like I have over the past little while, they look at me like, why would anybody want to watch that? And then when I talk to people I know that are in their 20s, they just don't care. They don't think it's like, whoa, so crazy and so hardcore or anything. They feel kind of indifferent towards them. But it seemed to be Gen X. We were the ones that were like pushing hard for this shit. Like when I was a little kid, they had the serial killer trading cards. Ran over to the Daily Planet and bought, it's not a joke, the comic book baseball card store in Pickering where I was called the Daily Planet. And we scored those, and then they pulled them off the market. And I ended up losing mine because for whatever reason, I lent the pack I bought to a friend of mine whose mom found them, and she confiscated them all. And I couldn't exactly say anything because if I did, I ran the risk of her telling my parents that I bought them, and I knew my parents wouldn't be cool with that. And then we were always sort of like, we were obsessed. By the time I found these, when I was in grade 7 or grade 8, the world's wildest police chase thing was in full effect. Cops had completely, the entire, like, I mean, all of North America was enthralled by cops. And then there was like real TV. We had eventually throughout the rest of the 90s, there would be the world's scariest police chases, world's wildest police chases, and, you know, world's scariest videos, world's wildest videos. And they were all hosted by John Bonnell, for anybody that remembers them. And we were like raging hard for this shit. Like, if you could see somebody get mangled by a tank or somebody get whipped through a windshield as the result of a bad accident, we were all over it. So the fact that these movies had such a significant impact on my generation, it's not really that surprising given our upbringing, given how in the 80s our parents were really liberal. Like, they'd let us watch pretty much anything. And then, so of course when the 90s rolled around, a video store opened up the street from where I lived, and the guys that worked there, Jesus Christ, we were like little kids, but they're like, yo, you want to see some crazy shit? Check this movie out. But if you really want to see some crazy shit, go to the special interest. You got to check out the Faces of Death. You got to check out the Traces of Death. You got to check out the Mondo Canes. And we did. We scooped them all up. But the ones that resonated the most were the Faces of Death movies. And I really think the cover art had a lot to do with that. My favorite cover art is the second one. I find it to be just so cold and so clinical. There's something actually that I've always found really scary about the cover for Faces of Death 2. But this one is my overall favorite. And I think it's because this is kind of the one where it's like, this is the last one before things got kind of blown out of proportion. Apparently in the 5th one or the 6th one, Dr. B. Gross commits suicide, which again is bullshit. But nevertheless, the character of the doctor, he's a real guy. Shouldn't have said character. He's a real doctor. He commits suicide. I haven't seen the 5th or 6th ones. This one was like the rock star of the bunch because it had the satanic cult and it had the guy pinned between the subway. And And this one, despite the bad reenactments, this was the one me and my friends used to watch endlessly. And at the end of this one, it has a song that was apparently written by Dr. B. Gross. And it's like, you're watching Faces of Death, Faces of Death, you're watching Faces. It's like this acoustic track, and he's all trying to be all like introspective and shit. And I love these like cutaways that they'd have where it would show somebody being mangled or whatever, real or fake, and it would cut to Dr. B. Gross eating a meal. Because, you know, this type of shit doesn't turn his stomach because he's a medical professional. And, of course, whatever the meal he'd be eating, it'd be chicken or whatever, and it would cut to, like, a slaughterhouse, a bunch of shots from a slaughterhouse where chickens were being butchered because, you know, whoa, he can eat it and not think twice about it. Oh, fuck. I think the good I can say about this is the more real footage, which is so obvious when it's like the teenagers on the boat, when the girl gets run over and her chest gets all slashed up. That's really fake because it's like there's 2 or 3 different camera angles, like different cameras in the water, and then there's a camera on the beach, and the footage looks really professional. And the footage, of course, is all from the 1980s. But it's a professionally shot video from the 1980s. Because then when it would cut to real footage of actual camcorder footage that somebody was taking of some sort of atrocity that happened, some accident or something that took place in the 80s, you could clearly tell that it was real and it was shot by an actual person who just happened to catch the car blowing up or whatever it was. It was so obvious that like there was this complete split between reality and fiction. Like, you know, like SWAT guys don't really wear a lot of baseball caps that say SWAT on them. That's like something like a TV show like Hunter would do. And I love Hunter. Fred Dryer, Stephanie Kramer, they fucking nailed it. That show was amazing. I do also have to say that I feel like it was a huge mistake when Stephanie Kramer left to pursue a career in music. I really felt like those two together were pure TV. Man, Jesus Christ, this has nothing to do with it. But yeah, nevertheless, it's like it would fit better in an episode of Hunter than it would like in apparently real footage of like, you know, some guy who got trapped in a bank vault when he was trying to rob it and he ran out of air and suffocated. I just don't buy that. It just looks fake. But the tone, I think the one thing that like always sort of ended up like me and, or at least always that we found, me and my friends, so I found really attractive, was just how ugly the tone was. It's opening up with real shots of like bodies in the morgue. And it ends, if memory serves, with one of the bodies being put into a crematorium, I think. I think that's this one, at least. It doesn't matter, because like I said, or I might have said at the start, you've seen one of these, you've seen them all. Is there anything else I wanted to say? Yeah, it was a big deal when I was a kid. And it's funny, too, because that does sort of continue on. It's like, when we got a little older, I mean, we got hooked on real TV, and then as the 90s went on, The World's Wildest Whatever, and then there was Rotten.com, Ogrish, or Ogrish, depending, and The Style Project, and Live Leak, eventually, and I think that was like a Gen X thing, because we obsessed. I remember me and a couple of my buddies used to live and die at the Style Project, hoping to find footage of somebody who was run over by a fucking tank or something. And by that point, I was in my early 20s. The Style Project was a big deal from roughly 1999 to 2002. Man, me and my one buddy, Billy, we lived and died on that website. It had like the fucking coolest links ever. Like the most violent sort of like flash games. It had the craziest footage of, like I said, people being run over by tanks, and like chicks and fucking pantyhose stepping on hamsters and fucking like high heels and shit. The Style Project was fucked, and we loved it. And I think that's where I'm going to leave it, because, oh, Jesus Christ, I have been rambling about Faces of Death 4 and even a bit about Hunter for over 10 minutes. And I apologize for that. But nevertheless, thank you so much for hanging out with me for, well, almost 10 and a half minutes now while I discuss the 4th installment in the somewhat long-running franchise of the Faces of Death films, which apparently Charlie XCX is rumored to be starring in the remake of the first one. Didn't see that coming. But like always, if you like this review, or you like seeing people get run over by tanks, don't forget to go out and do something nice for somebody. But most importantly, don't ever forget that the world is a hell of a lot more fun because you're here. I'm getting out of here. I just don't give a fuck about this movie anymore. It doesn't scare me, it doesn't enthrall me, it does nothing. I think I'm just old. Whatever. Have a good night.